Okay, and we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we? Good to see you all. I'm very jealous of Rich's background now. It's much more swish than mine. I need some color changing LEDs somewhere, I reckon.
Yeah, I can make some of those colors happen. Oh, where we are, color over here. Ooh, I can even let's crank the brightness up a bit so you can see them a bit more easily. You can like go through the whole rainbow. People say that LEDs, I don't like the color of LED lighting, but you can have literally pretty much any wavelength that you like. So with these crazy fancy color bulbs, you can do whatever you want. Woo. But yeah, it's almost finished. It's almost finished, but it definitely has got a little bit of work still to do. My living wall, it's been a little bit of a pet project of mine. Let me know what you think.
It reminds me of those like Chester Zoos near me, and it reminds me of the tanks that you see in like the amphibian house, and you're kind of walking around and you just stand there like, where's the snake? I can't see it.
Yeah. Well, that would be next level if I have maybe some amphibians in there. Although I'm not sure quite what I think about containing animals in zoos and stuff like that. They often have like giant enclosures. It's probably not too bad. But people who have vivariums at home and there's this tiny glass cube with like frogs or whatever living in there, it's like they're probably quite bored if they get bored anyway. But yeah, they're mostly tropical plants. So you're quite right. They are. Whoa, interesting. Sorry about that. I should have my phone on silent, shouldn't I? Yeah, they're mostly tropical ferns and what else are they? Yeah, tropical plants for luscious vegetation. So today we're talking about, should your notes be beautiful? Now, we're going to probably get some interesting feedback on this one. I'm quite excited to hear what you, the community, have to say on whether you think your notes should be beautiful or not. And we'll make a few distinctions as to whether what we mean by beautiful, that is in itself a very subjective word. I don't know whether in different subjects, I don't know, be interested to see whether maths and chemistry will have any differences of opinion to what I think in biology. I put the question in the chat, actually. Have we had any responses? Whoa, the chat's it's off the screen. Okay, so yeah, no direct comments about the notes yet, I don't think. Mostly about the plants on the wall behind me. Okay, well, anyone want to go first, particularly?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Your camera's not on though, Ronnie, so you're not visible on the YouTube.
I'm trying to promote you to panelists, but it says TT will be rejoining the webinar as a panelist. So I don't know whether you need to kind of.
Well, I will just talk for now, and I'll be quick, and then I'll just do chat for now.
Dance and look pretty fast talking.
The most important thing about notes is that you use them to learn. And that is about using them after you've finished making them. So for me, it doesn't matter whether or not they're beautiful, so long as you can access the information and you actually do. Most students never go back to the things that they've written until right at the end of the course when they try to summarize, and then they panic because there's too many of them. So they need to be useful in the sense that you need to go back to them and use them to get information to help you to learn. That's the most important thing.
Okay, yeah. I would say there's a clear distinction for me between beautiful and organized or like tidy enough for them to be usable. I'm sure everyone's had the experience of they've gone back to notes that they wrote a year ago and they don't understand them, or it's so scruffy that they don't know how to link it all together, or they have used sort of highlighters or colors, but now they didn't write down the key of what the color meant. So there wasn't, they don't know what blue highlight means versus green highlight means. And so it is, for me, well, those of you that are familiar with my notes, I very much use a color coding system. I don't know if it's going to be big enough for you guys to see there, but I use a consistent color scheme throughout all of my notes. So the red has a purpose. I'm not using red to be beautiful. I'm not using it as an accent color to underline titles or to make things look nice. I'm using red for a purpose, and they are the key terms which you need to know because they're the ones that are going to get you the marks on the exam. I use titles and subtitles in blue, so you can easily see at a glance where are the different zones of information. This is the major topic, these are the subtopics, and which bit do I. So when you come back to access these notes, you can tell in a flash, oh, I need to know the phospholipid bilayer stuff. I don't need to know this. You can just go to, it's like a bit like a filing system in that respect. Black is your sort of standard notes. And again, you want them to be readable and you want them to contain just the information you want to know when you come back to it to revise, really, because you don't want reams and reams of notes if they're not going to serve you when you come back to use them later on. And I use green for examples and diagrams. Green is kind of my accent color to some extent, but examples are another good thing to throw in there in biology answers, because sometimes if your sentence in the exam doesn't quite nail the mark, giving a relevant example shows the examiner you know enough of what you're talking about that you do get the mark. So the examples are also pretty important. So that 4-color system, it doesn't have to be beautiful, but it is consistent. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think consistency is key. And we were just talking offline just before we started, and I was saying, your notes, it's definitely function before fashion. Hence, my choice of headgear most of the time, but it's got to make sense to you when you look back at it again. And I think, when you're making notes in class, or even, when you're making notes when you're watching one of our content guide videos, you want to try and stick to that color coding system. I've got a color coding system as well based on Rich's. It's very, very similar. Like all the red stuff for me, that's all definitions and really important stuff that you need to know. But I think spending then time taking that maybe template note and putting bubbles around the kind of title and getting your coloring pencils out and highlighting it. I mean, I can say, I've said it before, like the revision porn that you see on Instagram, where someone spent 2 hours of their life making this beautiful A4 sheet on amines. And it's like, well, it doesn't contain any different information than what I put together in 10 minutes, just using a simple color coding system. So is it worth doing that? Should you be jealous of people doing that? Not really. Okay, you're not going to get examined on how well your shading is and can you stay within the lines. So there is a difference between beautiful and organized and functional. It can still look good, okay, but you're not gonna you're not putting it in for the Turner Prize or anything at the end of the year, are you? So there's literally no point in going that far. So it is wonderful to see people doing that, but is it for everyone? No. Is it useful?
One of the things that I think is that what we're actually doing when we make the notes is to try to feel a bit more in control and feel a bit less stressed and a bit less worried. And if making the notes does that and doesn't take up a huge chunk of your revision time, then that's a really good thing, because if you reduce your stress, you're reducing the chemistry in your brain that stops you from learning, and then you can learn more. So it's really good. Like Jasmine is saying, if my notes are decent, I feel more motivated, because you feel like you're getting somewhere. But I think the real danger is students who, when it comes to revision, will not start past papers until they've written up their notes, and that tends to take weeks, and you just simply don't have weeks. So being aware of that as you go through the year and trying to make notes that you assume are your final edit, your final version, and then not going back over using them but not rewriting them all when you get to the end of the year is important.
And there's different ways that you can rewrite your notes. With us, we have a template note for each page, which is basically, it has the titles and the subtitles and empty tables for you to fill in. If you are trying to fill in that from memory, we're not copying. So you're not like basically working like a photocopier, writing one word from this page and rewriting on that page in a slightly neater way. But if you turn your sort of original notes upside down, try and fill in your template note from your brain. So try and retrieve that information out to populate as much of that page as possible. And then maybe the bits that you haven't filled in, that's showing you what you don't know. Like there's value in sort of that retrieval practice, but the value is in you dredging it out of your brain, not you transposing it from a slightly scruffier version to a slightly neater version. If you're doing that, you're only using what's called your short-term sensory store. If you say like, provides strength and rigidity, if you're doing like one word at a time, that's not, you're literally just putting it in, that word in there for a second and it comes out a second later. What you need to be doing is like trying to retrieve it from your long-term memory at the back of your brain and then put it on the page. And if you don't, then it shows you what you do know and what, most importantly, you don't know.
Yeah, I think a good time, sorry, Ronnie, to make notes is, and make, what one would consider a beautiful note is when you consolidate as you go through. So when you finish the topic in school or college, and you get to the end, consolidation is really, really important. Bringing all that information you've just learned together and making, a big, maybe an A3 summary page even, putting some time into something like that and making sure you understand all the bits and using that color coding system we're on about. That's a good time to maybe bring all your notes together and summarize on one page. And maybe, put some key questions down on there or something like that. Build it on your computer if you can, maybe some screenshots of common questions. But then obviously you can use that to help you revise and just as a memory jog and when you're revising. But MDTbot makes a good point, like never really using notes to revise. It's about past papers. And that's something that obviously we shout from the rooftops here at TT when you're revising, is using
and
as opposed to
having the awareness. There's two phases to passing the exams. There's the learning phase where creating the notes, from first principle. The student day 1, September, year 12, you can't go straight into past paper questions because you've learned nothing of it yet. So at that point, creating the notes and getting the comprehension, understanding the core principles going on and laying the notes down. Sometimes it doesn't make sense the first time. You will have to rewrite your notes, but that's like at the time when you're doing the learning phase. And then, but you're making the point that in revision phase, rewriting the notes, sure, if it's a topic that you missed a month of school, you didn't do it, you just have zero knowledge on that thing, you're going to go, but then you're not revising that topic, are you? You're learning that topic. You're just learning it in a time when you think you should be revising. So there's learning and there's revision. Notes are useful, really great for the learning phase, for getting your understanding down. And then, as Rich said, you can take your notes and summarize them, condense them, create diagrams, link them all together, do that kind of synthesis stuff. That's much more of a revision activity where you take maybe a chapter of notes and then you extract just the things you need to know and put it on one A3 page. Might be 50 pages of A4 and you end up on one page of A3. That you have to really understand what's going on to extract those important bits of information. That can be a really useful revision activity. But just simply rewriting those 50 pages of notes isn't going to do you very much value. Well, it might be good, but how long is it going to take? It's going to take hours and hours compared to, it's not very good value for money in terms of time spent for marks on the exam gate.
I was going to say about MDT bot saying, what if I just don't make any? And I was just thinking, actually, that's like, it's a really good question. What if I don't make any? So imagine you are learning the piano. Would you make any notes as you learn the piano? No, you don't have a set of notes. You just practice the piano and play the piano, and then you go in and do an exam and you take your piano exam. You don't have any notes. But I think something like biology, with all of these facts you need, I think the notes are more useful. So maybe it's about the subject itself. Like I think it was Megan was saying chemistry, not sure about chemistry. Maths, I think, is like the piano. I think you could get away with having no maths notes at all and just doing practice regularly and following up on things you don't understand. I think that
Ronnie, that's an interesting thought experiment. If it was only the two possible choices, notes only, no questions, or zero notes and practice questions only, which student is going to do better on the exam?
I think the student that's actually used the information in context and done the questions and done the papers 100%.
Yeah, definitely. If you take the piano analogy, you could have that student would be the book student, knows all the scales, knows everything like perfectly in terms of the theory, but never touched a piano, versus a student that's only played the piano and can only play but doesn't really have so much idea about the theory. Like, which one's a better pianist, or the one who's been practicing piano for years? I think it's self-evident.
That's it. And it's funny that we just mentioned it's about the subject, and Elle was saying, like, for biology it really worked, helping them to kind of improve their knowledge in biology. But for chemistry, it never really was that useful. And I think you've got like almost like the two extremes really with maths and biology, where we're only saying, you don't really need any notes for maths, it's about doing it, and biology is just so much to remember, like just the sheer volume of stuff you have to remember. Now I think I kind of sit in the middle almost, because I've kind of got one foot in biology where there's actually loads to remember, but there's a load of application and kind of application of principles and stuff more so in chemistry than biology. So if somebody said to me, how do I, what do I need to know about amines? I'd be like, well, actually, make some notes on amines, because there's a lot of different reactions you need to remember. mole calculations, what's the point of making notes on mole calculations? You just need to get stuck in and just do them. And the practical questions as well. So it swings and roundabouts. I'm kind of like 50-50 really. Chemistry was a tough one.
Yeah,
and
also
like a great way of using the notes. Megan says, I use the content guide lesson before the school lesson to make my own notes and then add to them in class or annotate them in class, which is a really, really good learning exercise. And then you've got it all on one piece of paper, and then you can look at them afterwards and then use the exam guide to do practice at revision time.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent strategy there, because you want your notes to be, you don't want to handwrite the textbook, even if you could. The technology textbook's over 700 pages long, and if you were to handwrite it, how many pages? It would be literally thousands of pages long, and it's just not feasible or practical to learn that much information. So even if you could handwrite that whole thing, it wouldn't be a good strategy. So having your notes when you've finished the kind of learning phase in a format that you can go back to them and reference them if you need to find the essential information is the way forward. That's what you need. And so that's why we always sort of recommend TT students either do what Megan's suggesting there, or you have a separate folder for your TT notes, because they are designed to be your template to come back to at revision time if you need to go. And then at revision time is go to the questions first. If you're lost on the questions, then you can go back to your notes and fill in any missing gaps. And if you don't need to, then you can progress with more questions. So yeah, fantastic strategy, Megan. Biology, you will not remember all the facts on first go. There are facts in the biology course that I still forget because they don't come up on the exams very often. And I'll be sitting there in a paper is like, this is a simple recall fact if you know it. But I have at this moment in time misplaced that information in my brain because I haven't done it often enough. With memory, it doesn't work like computer memory. You don't save it and then it's there for good. If you don't use that information, if you don't access that information in your brain, it will sort of decay over time and it will just disappear. So even with your name, to take a really extreme example, to give another example, I had a phone card pre-mobile phones when I was like probably a 12-year-old, no mobile phones. I had a card that wasn't I could phone my parents with it. It wasn't my parents' phone number, but free. I could phone my parents landline from anywhere that I wanted to. It was like a 12-digit number or something, and I had it down pat. I didn't need the card and I had it absolutely memorized. And if you told my 12-year-old self, when you're however old am I, 35, when you're 35 you would not remember that number, I'd be like, no way, I know this number, I'm never forget it. No idea, because I've not recalled it since. My parents' landline number is the same, but I have used that maybe even only once a year now. But because I constantly just refresh my memory of what that landline number is once every 6 months, once a year, it's still in there. Whereas that number that I've literally not looked at or touched for 10, 20, 30 years, like it's gone. Literally wouldn't be able to pick it out even from a multiple choice list.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I have one of those cards as well. It's like, I think it was a 16-digit number, so we did well to remember that. But yeah, I remember Ronnie a little while back using an analogy, like if you walk through like a cornfield or something like that, and you make that pathway, you make that link from one side to the other. If you walk it once, you probably leave a bit of a trail behind you. You walk it 2 or 3 times, and that path gets strengthened. That corn you're walking over kind of gets flattened, and you're making that a really strong kind of pathway between one side and the other. And I think that goes like revisiting that stuff and recalling it, and that's how you're supposed to use flashcards as well, is making sure once you've gone through a pack of flashcards once, it's not done and that's it, done. I can put those on the shelf and I can forget about them. You need to come back to them fairly regularly and work your way through them. So doing flashcards just before an exam, not so good. Making them as you go through the course for use later on, that's better. So it's about repetition, ladies and gentlemen.
And I mean, this is kind of common sense, but we get asked all the time for, can we give a copy of the template notes pre-filled out? So all you have to do is just print the template note and it's got all the information on it already. Well, you have a copy of this. It's called your textbook. Everything's pre-printed. All the information existed in there before you started your A-levels. Before you'd even looked in that book, the information was printed out, but you didn't know it because you didn't write it. So it's really important that even if your friend has got really lovely, beautiful notes, photocopying them is not doing you any good whatsoever. Like it's zero value in taking a photocopy because it's not active. It's a completely passive skill. We like the idea because it looks nice, it's got all the information on it, but so does the textbook. I mean, some of them don't look that nice, but it's the work is done by creating the note, by making the association between I'm writing this key term in red, therefore it's a key term. Like those neurological links that you're making is what makes your notes most effective for learning and then effective for revision, because it's easier to find that information. You know how to visualize the page because you literally created it yourself.
So anybody got any other questions on making notes or anything like that? Because I feel like we've done a good 20 minutes on that. I think maybe if you've got any other questions, we can move on to those for 10 minutes or so before we finish up.
Yeah, so Elle's just asked that one, but let's deal with any notes related questions first, and then we'll come back to Elle's question about being a private candidate and feeling a bit lost. So we're not going to ignore you there, Elle, but let's just round off the topic of template notes. Any other tips or suggestions that you have for other students that you found work well for you? You can chuck them in here. Rikil, a blast from the past there. Well,
you're
pleasure.
very welcome.
How is medicine going?
Yeah.
Is it everything that you hoped for and worked hard for and fought for?
Speaking of courses, just while Rikil's getting back, sorry, Rich.
I was going to say, just on a personal greedy note, have you left a TT review anywhere, Rikil? Because that's exactly the kind of thing we'd love you to share. We have literally thousands of students who have this experience, and it's sometimes like getting blood out of a stone trying to get people to write a little review. You could even just copy and paste that and stick it in Facebook reviews is the best place to do it. If you wouldn't mind, that would be amazing, because we know that our system works. It just is quite difficult to persuade other people who are quite skeptical, and understandably so. There's lots of other options out there that aren't as effective and aren't worth the money. So
also a lot of the things we say seem weirdly counterintuitive. Making notes doesn't necessarily mean you learn anything, and all sorts of stuff, but it is all very much based on theory and practice and research.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think if there are any other questions on notes that come through, then we can pick them up. But let's move on. So there's Elle, and Kaz9 has also put an interesting question in there, which I think we can touch upon as well. But let's go in chronological order. Advice to private candidates and resit students. Okay, I would say, do you have a TT subscription is the first thing I'd like to know, because if you're one of our students, then we can hold your hand much more. We can guide you through the process. We've got the live classes, and we can make sure that you're going to get through all the content on time. If not, what is your strategy? Are you getting a private tutor? Are you just doing it from the textbook? Are you using other online resources? So I'd say, Elle, give us some of that info, and then we can give you a bit more prescriptive advice. Okay, so you do for chemistry. Rich, over to you then, I suppose. What any suggestions for taking a bit of control?
For Elle?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think first thing, if you're a private candidate, you've not got the timetable, like the school or college timetable that you've been used to your entire life in terms of education. So you need to make sure that you give yourself to your subject as much as you would be if you were in school or college. And, again, it's something that Ronnie's saying. I seem to be just taking words out of Ronnie's mouth and kind of regurgitating them, but it's about,
as I say, very wise things, Rich.
You are very wise, Ronnie. Yeah, that's it. So it's about, you're doing a full-time course. I mean, that's a full-time, it's equivalent to a full-time job. So you need to make sure you're actually dedicating a good number of hours to each subject and spread them out through the days in terms of your learning. So I'm going to make an assumption, because there's a lot of students out there that have done year 12 and year 13 and now just on a kind of gap year, kind of private candidate year, kind of recapping on everything they've done. So if you are in that position, you've done year 12 and 13 and now you're just kind of working on your own towards next summer's exams, I would start by smashing through all the AS papers. Don't go back and read over and learn and make notes on the year 12 content. For me personally, I would say go and do every AS paper you can get your hands on, and then use the TT method.
Do them properly, using TT method.
Using TT method, yeah, absolutely. So timed, exam conditions, mark it using our mark scheme and the TT method. So the marks you drop focuses on the areas that you're not so good at. And then it will highlight, by the time you've done 2 or 3 papers, it will highlight, well, I'm no good at equilibria. I can't remember the alcohols part of organic chemistry. I keep getting those ones wrong. So rather than, trying to relearn the whole thing, you're then just focusing on the areas that you need to, and it will really kind of filter out all the things you could be doing at a waste of time, and you focus your energy on the things that you really need to work on. And then do the same for the year 13 stuff with an A-level paper as well. So that would be my advice if you have gone through all that. But if you haven't, if you are learning it yourself from scratch, then you just got to follow us through the course and just use the content guide and work your way through.
Yeah, and complete the content guide by April. So you've got April, May, June, and a bit of July this year for using the past paper practice, because just knowing the content isn't the end of the journey. The end of the journey is loads of exam practice, linking all those cross-topic questions together, doing the application, and getting good at the exam, because ultimately that's what determines your grade. And one more thing to add to what Richard said: if you've got a private tutor, I would say get them to chart your progress. So all these AS papers and A-level papers you're going to be doing between now and the exam, get them to document your grades along the way, so that should for whatever reason the exams be cancelled, then you have a body of evidence, and then that tutor can they can give you your predicted grade. They can act as your teacher to submit your calculated grade for you, just in case the exams are cancelled. So just
they might be able to.
Well, yes, yeah, I mean,
it depends,
might be able to.
The rules are changing all the time, but they might be able to. You never know.
If you've had someone who's sort of independently been checking you in sort of exam conditions along the way, then that way they have a decent body of evidence. Maybe keep all of those papers, keep all the mark schemes, keep everything so that you can submit that to the exam board if you need to in terms of evidence.
Can we go back to that question? And also Wolfgang is saying the same thing.
9.
Yeah.
Castor 9, how many hours a day should I do as a year 13 student?
And Wolfgang is saying the same.
Similar question. Yeah.
It's basically, the answer is that it is a full-time course, 50% of which is in lesson. So you should be spending about 4 hours per week per subject in lesson, and about 4 hours per week per subject out of lesson. That is the basic answer. But on top of that, it is worth you doing about 2 hours a week on your AS, unless you don't remember anything from the AS and you don't feel it went well, in which case you need to up that. So you need to add on, because I very much doubt your teachers are setting you 2 hours a week of AS revision. Now, when do you do that? And about feeling burnt out, if you do it during the day, then actually it's really easy to fit into Monday to Friday, and you don't need to use weekends or evenings. But most of us are a bit rubbish at doing that. And so it's more about an average per week. So an average per week of about 30 hours is what you should be doing, including lessons.
Yeah, and it will change throughout the year as well. There's no single answer that is going to be right. Again, imagine a year 12 student in the beginning of September. It's going to be 100% content focused. And a year 13 student in May is going to be 100% revision focused. So your balance between learning new content versus revising past content is going to shift. And also to some extent, the amount of hours per week. But if we simplify things, then 4 hours per week per subject in class, 4 hours per subject per week outside of class, and then of your 4 hours outside of class, you can shift the proportion of learning content to revising past content, and building the habit from year 12 that some of that 4 hours per week outside the class is recapping past content is essential, because as I said, memory doesn't work like it's in and then saved. You have to go back and access some of that past information for it to stay in your brain. And so therefore you need a proportion of your week to be basically revision or recap of past content in order for it to still be in your brain 2 years later when you sit the exam.
And what you could do is you can come to our study group on a Sunday. It's for year 13 students for doing AS revision. It's very structured. We tell you exactly what to do. It's every single Sunday. So it just kind of takes the pressure off you dealing with that. And it means that we have this nice group that meets each week, and everyone sits down and we do some AS work to keep that ticking over.
And something we really focus on is making sure that every hour you do really counts. So rewriting your notes to make them beautiful, ineffective use of your time. You could spend 10 hours doing that and it would basically not be that useful to you. 2 hours of a focused action hour, 2 focused action hours on testing yourself and then finding out where your weaknesses lie. That is going to be a way better value for your time spent. So time put in isn't all equal, if that makes sense.
Right.
Any more outstanding questions? We've done our half an hour.
Just while thinking of questions, I think because I've just locked it in today, if anyone's out there who are getting interviews, anybody got any offers of interviews yet? I know they're probably going to be very different this year. We've got a brand ambassador. Luke was with us for a couple of years as a brand ambassador, and he really, really knows his stuff. He works so hard to actually kind of find out what the best kind of information and advice was when it comes to UCAS and stuff like that. And he's now in Sheffield studying dentistry. He's a first year dentistry student. And he's just got in touch last week and said, look, you know, if anybody wants any advice on UCAS or interviews, then I'm happy to help. So next Monday, this is the first, you know, anybody's going to hear about this. Luke is going to join us live in this session next Monday to talk to you about UCAS application and in the main interview technique and stuff like that, because I know it's the season where students year 13s are starting to get interviews in, but he's going to be here to answer your questions about UCAS in general as well. And of course, dentistry. So if any of you are dentistry students or you know anybody that's looking to study dentistry, whether in year 12 or year 13, I promise you it's going to be really, really useful to come along next Monday at 6 o'clock. But like I said, it's not just for dental students, it's for everybody. The advice is generic, but you know, he is a dentistry student and that's where his area of expertise is. So even for medicine students and stuff like that, because it's a very similar process, you should definitely come along and ask Luke some questions. So I'll be on Instagram. And if you follow us on Instagram, then I'll be putting out a story just to ask you guys to submit some questions for Luke before next Monday, so we can answer them live next Monday at 6 p.m. for you.
Fab. Yeah, anyone who found any of the content that we shared with you today useful, it'd be really great to get a little thumbs up down in the corner there. It helps other students find the channel. And yeah, basically all we do on this channel is help A-level students with very, very real advice, and like all based from our multiple years of experience, feedback from students. So if you found it useful, give us a like. I can see it's jumped up from 8 to 12 already. So thank you everyone who's done that. It'll help us bump us up in the algorithm. There's one little thumbs down there as well. Just out of interest, if that was you and you want to get in touch to say what it was you didn't like about it, we're super open to feedback. All we do basically is spend our entire lives trying to figure out ways that we can help A-level students. So if we've done something that annoyed you or you didn't like, let us know. And yeah, you can contact us at tailoredtutors.co.uk/contact and fill in the little form there. Let us know what you didn't like, because the more feedback we have, the better we can get in the future.
That's just jumped from 1 to 2 since you said.
Well, there you go. Well, let us know.
Well, let us know. I mean, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, you can't please. What is it? Is it Bob Marley lyric? You can't please everyone all the time. I can't remember what that lyric is, but yeah, some people. Oh, it's gone down again. Back to 1. Fab. Okay. Well, that's pretty much everything from me. Any final questions? Obviously, if you're a TT member, chuck it over to us in the course and we'll answer your questions in there. Live classes this week are obviously happening as usual. We're going to take a 2-week break over Christmas because from our experience, basically nobody comes to those live lessons. We're just going to take a little bit of time off. We will still be available, obviously, in the comments in the course, but live lessons will continue for another couple of weeks until the 2 weeks that you have off for your school holidays will be available to answer your individual questions, but we just won't do group sessions in the course.
Cool. Thank you very much, guys. See you later.
Thanks you all, and see you again soon.